Hi, Jonathan York from Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. COVID-19 really still dominating the investment world, but it's really the spread of the virus now that's sort of taking concern. It's sort of quite ironic really that cases in China appear to sort of plateaued, and indeed in the sort of ground zero area, seems to have sort of abated now and actually starting to decrease. But now it's the spread really, Italy really being hit reasonably hard, also South Korea. So while the travel ban seemed to have sort of slowed the progress down, obviously it hasn't contained it completely. But also as well, maybe some travellers have been, maybe a little bit sort of selfish as well and just sort of travel no matter what, and that obviously hasn't helped the case. Obviously, the major issue is still that there is no vaccine available at present. In terms of curing it, they do seem to be making some headway in terms of the disease, but still the mortality rate is still relatively low compared with other viruses and diseases over the course of time. Indeed, quite interesting. Larry Kudlow has just come out in the US in an interview saying the US has contained the virus and the US economy is holding up pretty well. Now, certainly the stock market doesn't seem to be reflecting that. The Dow Jones is down around 1,600 points in the last 2 days. But again, to put that in perspective, that's just over 5%. It was quite interesting in the US. Obviously, interest rates have really fallen dramatically over the last sort of 4 to 6 months. The 10-year now is down around 135. Now that's sort of quite interesting because that's the rate that a lot of the mortgages are set off in the US. And obviously there's really quite a bit of activity out there now in terms of refinancing mortgage rates as these interest rates have fallen. So in the US, presently, a 30-year fixed mortgage is currently around sort of 3.4%. Just over a year ago, that was 4.5%. So certainly still looks a bit of a rocky time out there for equities, but again, I think you just got to be careful and not sort of get caught up in the sort of hype and the, the sort of dramatic news that's sort of hitting the headlines pretty much on a daily basis. Again, it's quite interesting that Apple have now reopened about 24 of their shops in China. On the political front, Bernie Sanders seems to be making some pretty good gains and sort of headway on the Democratic polls, and it's now just going to be a question to see how he really performs in Super Tuesday. Because at present he appears to be the front runner. The major issue is that most of the major sort of political commentators really don't feel that he could win on a head-to-head election against Donald Trump. What was quite interesting as well, obviously in the first sort of televised debate that Michael Bloomberg took part in, he appeared to perform, at best sort of average. Really, most political commentators thought it was a little bit below average performance. He probably needs really to step up his game, especially going into a Super Tuesday. Well, what is quite interesting as well, certainly in the polls, is that it's becoming a much tighter race in the US now. Before the Democratic nominations, whoever it was going to be, well, it had a reasonably comfortable majority over President Trump, but that has now narrowed really quite substantially. But then the polls were certainly wrong in 2016 as well. But then if this sort of COVID-19 really does take hold and the US economy does sort of suffer between now and November and election day, it could be very interesting for the president. Because certainly at the moment, with the economy doing pretty well, the sort of common consensus is that President Trump will get elected for a second term. Oil having a tough time, obviously, with COVID-19, potentially slowing global growth. And that's really under quite a bit of pressure out there. In the UK, Brexit negotiations on trade are starting to take place, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how they sort of play through. Still got the budget coming up as well in a couple of weeks, and again, it'll be interesting to see what sort of policies are put in place or proposed for the UK economy going forward. A little bit closer to home in Australia, certainly the housing boom is still in full swing. But again, it's going to be interesting to see what impact COVID-19 will have on that. At present, it really is too early to say. Here in New Zealand, again, the economy is okay, but, potentially could be hit with a bit of a double whammy. Obviously, with the drought impacting on the sort of dairy and agricultural sector, and obviously also tourism as well with COVID-19. Obviously, what was quite fortunate with the big surplus, and that is now being sort of potentially allocated in terms of infrastructure spend going forward over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. Now, hopefully that'll be enough to keep the economy going, and if COVID-19 can be sort of contained and is not too serious, tourism will then return and sort of pick up, and the economy will get a further little boost. Certainly, the housing market is giving a pretty decent boost at the moment. Still pretty gangbusters, obviously with the low rates and low mortgage rates. Still potentially a little bit of friction within the coalition government, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how that sort of plays through, especially in the polls, but also as well, obviously, we head down to the September election. Because on the current polls at present, in terms of the coalition government, there'll only be Labour and Greens that will be re-elected back into Parliament. New Zealand First at present is below that 5% threshold. Now, obviously, it's a little bit tough out there if you are looking for income options. Bonds and TD rates are pretty low. But if you are looking for alternatives, call us on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.